Hello, everybody, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, episode 5.0, our story time release. Yay! The first of which is the Weird Dev Stories. Thank you for joining us here live on Twitch. For those who are listening in the future in the podcast, watching us on YouTube, or perhaps streaming this on Twitch after the fact, we hope to see you live in our Twitch chat in the future, Thursday, 7 p.m. GMT. We are with our usual hosts with the mosts. We have Chris.
Yo.
And we have Patrick.
I'm sorry, I just can't. I'm looking at the flappy ears.
And
People
we
who
also...
are listening to a podcast and don't see the video, they're missing out so much because Josie has floppy ears and she's flopping them constantly, and it's so adorable.
I was just going to introduce our guest, which is Floppy the Hat. I don't know if we got a name for him.
That looks like a drop from Ragnarok or something. Like you remember those 2D RPGs? They were slimes that were
definitely
dropping hats, and they were like exactly the same smiling faces. So adorable.
Yes, in this particular case, I don't have a name for the hat. Maybe our viewers can help us out with names.
I like Floppy. I like that now.
But it's so obvious.
I know.
Do we really want to be so obvious?
No.
And hello. Hello, Andy F. Thank you so much for joining us. If you happen to, I don't know, leave a message for us here, we'll shout your name out, give you props, and dance. I actually have stories from some of the people who are watching today and lurking, and we'll get to them. But
so many stories.
Tradition dictates that we start with an icebreaker question.
Mm-hmm.
So... we may not have a guest, but I am still going to throw icebreaker questions at you. Let's get some OS int on our hosts. You ready?
Cool.
No.
What one sport can you not stand? And why?
Easy for me. Again, another easy one. The sport that almost everybody in England loves, football. I am not a football fan. I never have been. And what?
A Brit that hates football.
Oh, there's lots of us.
How dare you, sir? How dare you?
Believe me, I am now going to move house, though, because I will get lynched. Someone will have heard me or find out where I live and come around. No,
God, my tea is cold and my biscuits are soggy.
The one reason that I hate football, and I've formed this opinion over many years, is that the people who are into football, and I mean the people who are really, really into football, are 1,000%, and I hate using over 100%, by the way, but 1,000% worse than a geek in terms of how much they know about the players, the statistics, the formations, everything about it. And I actually spoke to some football fans a while ago to try and figure out what it is they liked it, and that's it. It's all of that knowledge. It's that kind of almost one-upmanship over the friends, over the know that this happened. I don't know. I think everyone's got their own opinion, their own reasons, but that's why I hate it, because they usually have a really strong opinion about geeks, about people like us.
Yeah, hardcore football fans are just self-hating geeks. I think that's a fact.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm not a big fan of football. I mean, it's not my my sport of choice. But what about you, Patrick?
I used to hate all sports. Like I'm not a sport person. All sports, anything physical, anything that involves people moving is it's a no-go for me. But over the years I mellowed down and I'm not as full of hate and misery as I used to. Now it's mostly misery.
Oh man. See, for me, I'm torn. I am torn between tennis, which just for some reason I took tennis when I was a kid, growing up, etc. I mean, I learned how to serve, I learned the entire system, love, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But most of the match is just watching people go back and forth with their faces.
And it's just like an important bit there. Like tennis is bunch of dudes in a skimpy outfit grunting vaguely sexually. And I think that's the appeal of the sport.
Well, see, that's why I like rugby.
Well,
but that's a whole different story. And
don't you think there's you just said repetitive then, as in the repetitive nature of knocking a ball. All sports are repetitive in their own way, shape, and form. And I'm quite a sporty person when I'm in the mood for it. But
I don't know. There's just something about tennis that just doesn't. It doesn't quite work for me.
I'm not.
Squash, I can get behind. Racquetball, I can get behind.
What, badminton?
Ping pong, I can even get behind. But there's just something about tennis. I don't know what it is.
What about badminton?
Oh, I love badminton. I used to be amazing at it.
I'm pretty good at badminton.
I think we can all agree that it's just case of a childhood trauma or something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And hello to you, Rylix037. We are indeed live. And hello and welcome. So that's our icebreaker question.
Yeah, and now on to the topic, which is story time. Gather round, children, for this is a time for a campfire and marshmallows and weird dev stories from all across the world.
Weird dev and tech stories.
I think my stories are a lot less weird than yours and a lot less techy as well. Most of mine are to do with people and kind of what, things that have happened or I've heard about from, ex-clients or ex-colleagues. And
well, we'll give them ratings based on the ears. How about that?
So what are we having?
We
0, 1,
we
and
could
2.
have chat vote on that, on like out of 10 or something, how good the story was.
Are the analog? Are the ears analog? Can you put them up a certain amount? No, it's just, there we go. Yes, okay. Right, we no longer have to have a tri-state scoring system.
Slowly rising.
I like them ears, they're good.
I am so in love with it. And the thing is, I'm freezing. For those of you who are watching and wondering why I'm actually wearing this, it's not an everyday occurrence. I just happen to be really cold. So obviously keeping the heat in from my head is the answer. And this is just the best thing.
That's why I'm wearing a jumper that's for about 8 times bigger than me. For when I was a larger person, I wore this, but it's still a very nice warm jumper.
Nice and warm. So we're going to start with stories, and I'm going to pick which order we do these stories in, because I'm going to mix it up between the stories that have been sent in to us by people who we have as audience, along with people who I've reached out to within the community of development, tech, security, and things of the like, and us, because we've been around the block a few times. Some of us are old. Others aren't. And they're still young whippersnappers.
But we're still old in our souls.
Oh, wow. Yes. So let's start off with Chris. Tell us a story. Okay,
so as I said, most of mine aren't techie, but I'm going to tell you the first one that I've told most people, so I might even have mentioned it on the stream before now. It is a technical one, in fact. So I've titled it FIMAS Catastrophe. Now, FIMAS was a system that I worked at a public authority many years ago. I didn't actually work on the system, and that's part of the story. In fact, I was working on a completely different system, and a database administrator said to me one day, I'm just going into a meeting, we're going to be about an hour, can you just run this script on this database for me? Everyone who's worked in a production environment before knows what's coming, to be fair. I was in the process, I happened to be at the time, I was particularly good at SQL Server, which was what we were working at, so that's why he asked me to help out. I was kind of a backup for them. And he went off into this meeting. The entire IT department was in a meeting, not me, as I decided to opt out. And I was writing a script. It was a generic script, and it was a SQL script that ran through an entire database, deleted every single field in every single table, and deleted every single table. Now, the reason I was writing this script was that I was running really complicated database creation scripts over and over and over again to test a DR scenario. That's disaster recovery for people. It's if something goes catastrophically wrong, you need to make sure that something can work, the business can still run. Unfortunately, I caused a disaster doing this by dragging it onto the wrong window in SQL Server, running the script, and wondering why it took more than a few seconds to run. And it was running on the central government. It was a government database. It wasn't a central one, but it was for the county that I was working at the time. Deleted the entire thing. Luckily, the meeting that the IT were in was also a company, like a wide meeting for everybody. I can't mention what I was working at exactly, but it was everybody that worked for the company, or the authority rather, was in this meeting. The finance department were in that meeting. The last backup was 1 minute before I ran after I ran the script. and it's an hourly backup. So they lost a full hour's worth of work, but luckily, because everyone was in a meeting, I didn't get in too much trouble. But I ran into the meeting, and I just kind of waved at the DPA. And he got the message, and yeah, I obviously owned up to it, and nothing came of it, but that could have been a big disaster.
I was lucky.
Yes.
I have to admit, it reminds me of when I was starting to learn Linux and when I was learning how to do things from remote sessions and things like that. And I was trying to set up and modify some binds in Apaches and stuff, so I could, do some site control and things like that. And I was at sudo, perhaps this might be where I get some of my names, but I was a sudo and I ran rm space -rf, not paying attention to where I was. It started and I was sitting there. It was probably about 2:30 a.m. when this was happening. And I started panicking. Probably a good 5-10 maybe minutes passed because this had a lot of stuff, old school software, things didn't run as fast. Freaked out, ran into the bedroom, woke my husband up because my husband is a geek extraordinaire. And I went, oh my God, I've deleted everything. I can't stop it. What do I do? He walks in, hits Control C, pats me on the head and says, we'll deal with it in the morning. It'll be okay. So, the guy who we run the server with, who I will forever be thankful for, he came in to look at it the next day, and he's just like, well, you only deleted about a third of the databases, corrupted about like 60% of the rest. It'll be okay. And, it was all right, but it was a learning experience. And it's the kind of thing where to this day now, if I have to do any kind of, command line removal of files, directories, or anything else like that, I quadruple check. I'm PWDing before I even start typing in the command. I need to make certain that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
I actually wrote a blog post because of what I did in that SQL scenario, and it was the importance of fault-part naming of databases. If I'd have just put in there's a variable at the top, if I'd have just put in 2 more parts to the name, it would have been server schema database, and then table name or whatever it was, and it wouldn't have affected the database. It said cannot find table, but instead it was just generic delete everything. So Never done that since.
Since we're starting with the stories of our personal fuck-ups, I think I'm gonna...
what was it, 14 minutes this time?
It's a record. It's a record.
No, you're right, it is a record. 14 minutes before the F-bomb. Go on, Patrick.
To be fair, I wasn't speaking. No, I did. Yeah, I'm very proud of myself. It's a progress. So, back in the day, when I was just starting, and that was my first job at Game Dev Studio in-house office. Up to this point, I was just freelancer and working with passion projects, so the culture was very loose. Like, there is a reason why I use the F-bomb as a comma, because that's sort of where my initial English interaction, and that's what I learned at the top. And when I joined the company was also like, it's really great people. I'm still friends with them today.
1 second. And, is that an alarm?
Something went off. It's okay. I was just making sure I was sane. I thought there was some crazy noise going on.
For a second, I thought there was like a fire alarm or something. I was about to say,
okay. Go on, Patrick. Continue.
Sorry, please continue.
We're pretty close to Turkey here, so there is a risk of airstrikes and rockets and shit. So maybe they restarted the war. I don't know. But if they did, there is nothing I can do. So who cares? The show must go on, one way or the other. So I joined a company, and the culture in the office was very, very loose, very casual. Like we are, casual-ish. And I've got an assignment. I have to make a visualization for a client based on the assets that they provided. And I'm starting the work, and there is just something wrong with the assets. Like there is just something off. And I'm like, man, can I just speak with their artist, because I'm like part artist and their artist. It's gonna be faster for us to communicate than me talking to you, so you can talk to our communication person, so they can talk with their communication person. Like it's a long, inefficient fucking chain. Can we short it up? And no. Basically, I was saying, okay, there is something wrong with it, and they were saying, no, our assets are perfectly fine. and I'm still working on Unity, and I think we still had Git repo for it. And I get increasingly frustrated. And at the end, they finally come back and say, oh, yeah, it was our problem. There was problem with exporting from the 3D software. So I implement everything works. And my commit is finally got this shit to work because the client's artist doesn't know their fucking job. That was the comment that went in. At this point, I thought that all of the repos that we have are private. They were not. Clients did have access to them. And the HR person goes like, Patrick, we need to talk. And she explained the entire situation to me. I'm like, oh shit, guys, I take full blame for that. If you have to fire me to save the face, do it. I will not hold against you because I fucked up big time. And they said essentially, yeah, no, it's fine. I think they know that
the digital equivalent of having a conversation behind someone's back and then walking in.
Yeah, I was harsh. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So what about you, Josie? Then have you got a story in mind? I know you.
Well, we've kind of all done a bit of a story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull from one of our viewers' stories, and I am going to go with. I know what I'll do. I'll just randomly do it because randomization is random. Okay. So this comes from Indisposable, who is from the Get Cracking community Slack. And I just did a big old call saying, if you got a weird story, please send it in. And this is what they had to say. Used to have to copy files to and from a production server using RDP, terminal server. Copy paste via the clipboard.
Yeah, I know where this is going.
If the file transfer paste took a long time, you had to watch the session and move the mouse, hit the shift key, keep it from idle timeouts. Well, one day I got tired of drop connections and I grabbed an old pocket watch with a big second hand. I put the optical mouse on top of the watch and I had a free once-a-minute mouse jiggler.
That's not a bad idea, but...
Yeah, that's a good one.
How amazing is that?
That is a good one.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
I
thought it was going to be a catastrophe story, though. I was expecting a
yeah,
and then everything blew up.
These stories are catastrophes.
Yes, no, you're
right. Yeah, copy through clipboard. I was like, oh boy, that's going well. But I've used to do something similar when I was doing botting in video games. When I had set up a bunch of macros which are keyboard based, but to sort of to cheat the system, you still need to add some random mouse movements, so it wouldn't detect that you are making a mechanical keystrokes. And I think the way I did that, so I had little toy like a RC car.
Uh-huh.
So I wrapped like a paper, like a very strong paper around the wheels of RC. I put it on the top and I put the mouse on top of also, so it would continuously scroll.
We've all done that in EverQuest, though, haven't we? Back in the day when you swam against a wall for hours, you just leave the, something on the W key to get you swimming up.
Or rubber band with the app, just like a rubber band in.
Before we really had control pads on PCs back in the day.
This is actually hysterical because it leads into a story I was going to bring in. And this is one of those personal fuck-ups that I had where to this day I still get slightly embarrassed. I may blush ever so slightly while telling this story because of who I am and what I am known for. So you guys know me as someone who is exceptionally all up in the security parts of the internet and technology and security software. That's my baby is security. Well, way back in the day, back when I used to run a raid progression guild in WoW, we were running Naxxramas. And while we were running Naxxramas, I was, doing my little thing, laughing at how silly, because at this point, my guild was just these are lull fights. We're not really worried at this point. So we were making our way through, and I'm laughing about how silly and simple this all is because I was playing at the time a holy priest. So I'm like, yeah, lol, I just press 2 buttons and everything's fine. I could probably just macro this. And the guy who I had as our raid lead said, nah, don't bother macroing. It won't be a problem. I'm like, cool. I'm not going to do that. No biggie. So we keep running through, and we get to a point where all of a sudden my character stops, turns around, runs in an opposite direction, starts to stand still, moves in another direction, stands still, moves in yet another direction, stops, jumps, casts a whole bunch of spells, moves in another direction, stops, casts a whole bunch of spells. And I'm sitting there going, what the hell? Because my hands were up in the air. I was absolutely freaking out. So, of course, again, I turned to my husband, and my husband looks over and he goes, that's really weird. And you're not touching anything. I'm like, no, I'm touching nothing. He's like, huh. Come to find out, I hadn't known this at the time, but the new mouse that I had purchased had macro recording features in it. So I had pressed record and then pressed the play button for the macro. So the entire raid of my entire guild, the people who were there to do the raid and the people who like to listen in while we do these, heard me freaking out about the fact that my mouse had been hacked.
I've thought my mouse has been hacked in the past, and it's just because the mouse moves around on the screen, and it only seems to happen with laser mice. And it very occasionally, I don't know if something dirt gets stuck or something, and it's all over the place.
I'm blushing again. Good God. It's one of those things where it's so simple and so silly, and because my immediate reaction is usually to go like into the trained mindset of, okay, we have an intrusion. This is the things we need to look in. This is how we need to start doing root cause. Yes, I know, and I haven't been able to live it down, but I can own up to it now. I am older, I am wiser, and I still screw up.
If it makes you feel any better, the other day when I was editing the some audio, I turned on automation by accident. I hadn't used the software for such a long time. Turned on automation, and I kept playing it back, and it was going up and down. The volume was changing, all the EQ was going in and out, and I was just, the hell? And I'd clicked the bloody record the arm button in the program I was using. So, yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Rylix037 says, that's a sick idea. Way to beat Battle Eye. Oh, man.
So I think
I'll be okay.
I think maybe back to Pat then. Have you got another story you've got to tell? Or
yeah, that's gonna be the last one from me, but it's also quite entertaining. So the story is called "The Curious Case of 43 Cases," and
43 cases.
Yes. So at the same company that I made the Fateful Commit, I've got another project when I had to. I took over maintenance of. Game that they developed before, and they said, okay, Patrick, we need you to add some tutorial messages in the middle of tutorial. We want to like explain something better to players. I'm like, cool, easy. I mean, dude, adding checkboxes, like text boxes, how hard can it be? I'm looking at the code, and the entire tutorial is 43 cases. Whenever you click a button or like the associated tutorial messages, it just increases the increment of the thing. Yes. And it doesn't only display messages, it does all kinds of stuff like opens windows, pops up, like changes flags and stuff like that. So there is no feasible way to put things in the middle. Like there's just no like either I'm going to have to move all of the cases down and then pray to the god, because that integer that we're iterating through was also used for other stuff, by the way.
I see that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah, so the first thing I had to figure out is like which case fires when. So obviously the standard development practice of debug log kurwa. Which is fuck, but in Polish. In every single case, it was just like kurwa and the numerical of the case. So when you would play in editor, the game would just constantly screaming at you kurwas with numbers. But that was very helpful to track down where everything is. Now, how did I fix that? Because I'm like, dude, I don't have much time for that. Like, I don't want to refactor this monster. So what I did. In the points when I had to put them in, let's say there was like a case 2 and I had to add there, I add case 24, I manually switched the number to like 34, and then in that case I switched it to 3 afterwards. And that was like some of that. So it became even worse to maintain. And here is the kicker. I've met for a beers a few years back with the guys, and they say, yeah, by the way, your code that's like screaming at people, it's still in production.
You make me very sad. Very sad indeed.
I think that's just like that's the realities of Flash development.
That kind of leads on to one of mine, actually. I worked for a company a while back, all very old developers there, in the 50s, waiting to retire, basically. You know, they don't care anymore. They don't really want to learn new technologies, and they're just kind of happy to do things the way they've always done things. The practice there was every time they had a new client, they copied and pasted a VB6 app. And it was a fairly complicated VB6 app with something very similar to what you just described, massive God methods in it. And I mean, do it. You know, that was the name of the function, and just indented if statements forever. It was so unmaintainable and copied and pasted everywhere. So new legislation came in, new things that needed to be implemented. 250 programs had to be updated with this new legislative code. In specific, one time I needed to modify some of this code. I usually refuse to do it, but in this particular instance it was relevant, so I went for it. And I essentially pulled out loads of duplicate code, put it into a function, and kind of refactored it so it was a lot less code. I mean, it was still massive, but it was a lot less. A while loop I put in there. It was in VB as well. I think it was in VB.net. Within a while loop, I think I put while function name and the function returned true or false. You know, and then I did a lot of complex logic in this function. Not something I would normally do, but it was appropriate at the time. And I did this, changed it, handed it over to the old guy again, and he just looked at it and went, "Well, that's not going to work, is it?" And I said, "Well, yes, it does. I've tested it. There's tests there as well. I've written tests for it." And he's like, "What have you written tests for?" I didn't understand test driven. Anyway, you can see the pattern here. Constant pushback from it.
Yeah.
A week later, there was a bug with the code, and I said that I definitely catered for that in my when I did it. I've even written a test that tests specifically for that. Looked back at it, the tests had been commented out. The code that I'd written had been removed and basically copied and pasted back into the places that it was, and nothing had changed. It was exactly the same code because he didn't understand the concept of this. You have to give up after a certain point.
Automatically gets 2 ears up. I
just don't know where to. I don't know where to start with people like that sometimes, you know. But
well, hello, you suffering I enjoy. Considering the fact that this is all about weird stories of suffering for development,
you're like the RTFM
section. Yeah. Definitely welcome. Okay, so more stories, and this time I'm going to pull again from our viewers and listeners and things, and I am going to tell the story of egos beware. One of the things we try to stress here on this podcast, regardless, is don't really have an ego when it comes to development. There's nothing wrong with confidence, but ego will get you screwed over. So this comes from Dr. Owl, who, massive hearts for sharing this. I am going to be obfuscating bits and pieces of this to protect the guilty parties in question. So bear with me as I do this. So this particular individual was working with 2 people, a senior engineer and a tech lead. And they had done an early morning deploy of a site or of code to a site that they had supported. A short while after making this change live, the site went down. Off they went, laboring away to try to find out what went wrong. As they sat in the other side of the desk, I could hear things like, "Oh, is this it? No, it's not that. It's not that. Oh, might it be? No, nope, that's not it." And this went on for a while. And I asked, "Should I help?" "No," says this tech lead. "Leave this to the senior people." Well, this particular individual knew very well this particular bit of code and stuff because they built 80% of the platform. So it's not like they're new or anything. So they decided, you know what, I'm going to have a look anyway. About 10 minutes into looking, he found a misconfiguration in one of the files in the backend apps that was used. So he goes, "Hey guys," psst, psst, If you had a look at this particular file, the response he gets back is, shut up, we're busy trying to fix this major issue. Some more time passes. Lunch shows up. He goes, can I go to lunch? They casually ignore him, and he goes, all right, cool, I'm off to lunch. When he comes back, they're still having a problem. It is still persisting. They are now louder and even more confused than they were before. He gets a call from the customer going, what? What's happening? And then he takes the time to reassure them. We, in quotes here, bunny ear quotes, we are working on the issue. And then the tech lead turns around and is all, why are you talking to the customer? I'm the tech lead. I should be doing all of this. Even more time passes. And he says, fuck it. So he goes off into the config file, makes the changes, restarts the app, boom. Everything works. At which point in time, on the other side of the desk, there are calls of, it just started working, but we haven't changed anything in 30 minutes. What the fuck's going on? And he chimes in and says, well, do you remember that config file issue I was trying to tell you about hours ago? I just went in and fixed it. To which point he gets the glare of doom, funny ear quote, and is ranted at for messing about while they were investigating the problem.
Yeah.
Egos are the death of companies, I swear to fucking God. Like, I've reconnected recently with some friends that I haven't been talking for a while, and I've heard like heaps of stories like that, and at certain point I was like, okay, there is not enough alcohol and other stuff in this house for me to keep on going, because this is actively enraging. And like that stuff like that just boils my blood. It's
I do hope that throughout my career I haven't frustrated somebody as much as some people have frustrated me. You know, I like to think that I'm helpful when most of the time I can't think of instances where I've been awkward, apart from maybe hating some jobs and being a bit of an idiot towards the end of them. You know, but it was many years ago, of course.
Yeah, this is the thing.
Like, outright dismissal of someone who wants to help. I'm like, why would you even do that?
That's just it. This is one of those things where, you know, if they're in, this is something I have noticed, you know, from where my husband works, from when I have to deal with an incident that shows up, where what I do, etc. It's an all hands on deck. You drop your ego, because if you have an ego, you're going to interfere with your SLAs or service level agreements that you might have with your client, your customer, what have you. If you spend your time like that, you're wasting time. Take a moment and go, all right, stop and think. Because again, it could be that macroed mouse issue that I had before, you know? Take it back, go simple. And then if someone has an idea, don't rule it out. Just don't. I mean, unless obviously it's something along the lines of, well, I bet it's because of solar flares. At which point in time, well, again, depending upon what kind of technology you're working on, that could actually have an impact.
Hey,
you guys.
So what's the ISS?
Like, well, you guys.
Yeah.
So you know that bugs are because there were bugs in old systems that were like actual bugs? Have you checked the servers for cockroaches?
Instead of an American teen girl, you sound like an alien, crazy alien old person.
To be fair, I thought we were already, so...
You've made him a crazy alien old person. Get off my solar system! Oh
my god.
Like, holy cow, for reals? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. That just makes me feel so dirty. I'll need another shower after this. So I've got another story for us, Chris.
I've got a few short ones.
Okay.
I've had a few instances. There was one client a while ago, and I wasn't directly involved in it, but I was there when the event happened. And I've called this one "Testing a Tester's Patience." Couldn't come up with anything more clever than that. But this guy, he'd just come into this really high pressure project, and he was a good guy. He knew what he was doing when it came to testing. He was a quality assurance guy. Again, that was another place we've said on previous shows where I really appreciated the support guys, the testing guys, the QA guys, the project management. It was brilliant having a good team there. You know, I can't describe how much easier that makes a developer's job if they're not having to do everything. You know, because of smaller companies you do tend to. But anyway, this guy came in. He got really heavily involved in all these testing processes, and then something happened, and one day he just snapped, absolutely snapped. Started shouting in the office. Oh, I didn't mention that he was black as well. He started shouting in the office, and he was saying everybody was racist against him, and he punched the test lead guy. And I swear to God, there was nothing like that. Don't know where it came from. And he was a contractor, so I mean he was dropped immediately. He would have been if he was an employee, to be fair. But it just out of the blue, and you sat there with your headphones on, listening to music, and then this thing kicks off a couple of foot behind you. Someone gets punched, and it's like, what? I've never seen violence in an office other than that, personally. Anyway,
what happened? Did you ever figure out what triggered this?
No, it was completely random. I mean, we spoke to the people. I mean, obviously, I didn't get heavily involved because HR did. It was fairly serious accusations, but it was just that. There was a few times that when I spoke to him personally that he did seem to have a bee in his bonnet about race in general, which I understand. Everyone's different and everyone has different experiences of life. But he was whatever was going on. I think maybe he wasn't getting given the work that he expected, and he thought it was because of this. I really don't think it was. Personally.
Here is like the interesting thing about like all the issues of like racism, sexism, and so on, and mostly about like people who claim that are constant victims of racism, sexism, and so on. So I grew up in a country where I stood out racially because I was white with blonde hair and white eyes and bright blue eyes, and everyone else was brown skin, black hair, and brown eyes. And I was sticking out, and I was the tallest in school, so I was sticking out like a sore thumb. Mm-hmm. And there were certain instances where it was basically because I'm standing out, because I'm the foreigner kid. It's gonna happen, right? So, but I never would say that in general, like people in the country were racist or anything. If anything, they would always make me feel very welcome.
I mean, let's be clear, it happens, but
yeah, it does happen. Absolutely, as I said, like it did happen to me a few times. But the thing is that the minute you start claiming that it's like that it's racism or sexism, you set yourself up for a failure. Because even if your complaints are valid, which they may be, and then when you bring it to HR and you try to deal with it. But if you try to make it into a card of public opinion sort of deal, then when you always lose, because people have this adage in their mind of if you meet an asshole, then the person is asshole. But if everyone you meet is an asshole, maybe you are the asshole. So I think that was just the case with your guy. Like,
well, I think it probably was. He seemed okay on the face of it, but there was something slightly off with him.
It was just like he had a chip on his shoulder. That's what it is.
Yeah, but it was many years ago that, and it's just a crazy incident in an office. I've never seen that kind of. I've seen people lose it. Go a little bit out of their head. And
budget person, Jesus fucking Christ!
I mean,
I have never in any of the environments that I've been in seen that kind of a violence thing break out. That tends to only happen like if I'm out on the town or something. So, well, that is harsh.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, I've got a few other short ones we can run through. I was working in Manchester a good few years back now, and I was working for a well-known trading company. Again, I say more than that; it tells you who they are. But anyway, I was working for a well-known trading company, and they at lunchtime I went out one day to get lunch. I was looking at my phone, and I happened to be working on. It was in Salford, and it's right near the famous opera house in Salford. I can't remember the name of it now, but I was walking straight past that on the opposite side of the road to the opera house, and I kind of bumped into this guy. I was looking at my phone, and he kind of came out and hit me, and I looked up, and it was Deck from Ant and Deck. And I'd just bumped into Ant and Deck, and I
have no idea who this is.
These are B-list celebrities here in the United Kingdom. They're presenters.
I wouldn't
they're
say B-list.
One of them's a drunk.
Well, yeah, but they're very well known on national television anyway, put it that way. But anyway, I bumped into one of them, and the security guards, I mean, there should have been more on the ball, but they swarmed around me immediately and pushed me off, to get out of the way. But I got a smile from Deck, at least, anyway. But, I just walked into someone famous randomly.
But they didn't really good job as security guards if you could literally walk up and bump into a guy.
Exactly. I mean, it was just, I think they were doing a promo shot and there was a lot of crowd around them at the front, but the way that they were near the curb and I was kind of going around the outside of the curb because of this big crowd, didn't realise what was going on and bumped into them as the cameras were facing me, so if they were recording, I don't think they were, they'd have caught me, if they were doing it. But yeah, it was...
Ooh, so you're saying you're a celebrity? I didn't hear
I've been on telly, mate. I've been on telly.
Oh man, I don't
know. Okay, before we go off into the world of rich fame and excess, let's come back down to earth to more dev stories. So I've got a couple for you that a couple are going to be slightly linked together, and then I have what I personally consider to be the biggest what the fuck I think I have ever read. So we're going to start with a very short one from me about hashes. So back in the day, I got brought on to help out with somebody's website, right? Excellent. I come in to check the code to see how things are going because I happened to have discovered that the site had been compromised. So I wanted to see, obviously, how, where, and why. And the very first place that I started was looking at how they do the user registration process and all the things that go with it. And I discovered in this how passwords were handled. Now, I don't know if you know much about PHP, but this was an online website long time ago, and it was done through PHP. And what they did is when someone set up a user account, they would type in their password. The password was pulled into the function, which then immediately hashed it into MD5, which it's still somewhat used today, but it's one of those things where you're told try to avoid MD5 if you can. But anyway, this was back when MD5 was the bomb diggity. So it immediately hashed whatever they put in directly into MD5. And then it trimmed white space. Hashes don't have white space, but it trimmed the white spaces. And then, for even more fun, they took the string and uppercased the very first the very first character of the hash, and then they stored it. Now, when they sent password reminders to people, they sent it in plain text. The inside of me just feels like my stomach has now hit like the bottom, so I feel really, really, really sick. They sent the passwords in plain text to people. So even though they were hashing, they were still storing plain text passwords. And people would sit there and go, well, I go to log in, but it doesn't work. And it's because when they sent the emails, they also included white spaces and things to the side. And a lot of people will just select the line where the password's written, copy it, and paste. And there were so many issues with it. And I'm just sitting there going, no.
Can I have a quick RTFM related to this?
Okay, for those who are new to our show, RTFM stands for, obviously, read the fucking manual. But what it is for us, it's a chance to sort of rant about some of the things that we have experienced or the things that are going on in the world of dev and tech.
So my RTFM directly related to that is password maximum length rules.
Hey them.
Don't mind minimum length. Don't mind you must have a symbol. Don't mind you must have a number. All that kind of stuff, that's fine. But maximum length rules on passwords can get fucked. Stop implementing it. I'm sorry, I don't swear very often on this show.
No. You know what? I'm going to jump right on that, and I'm going to go even further. Don't have an 8-character limit on a bloody government website for logging in for a password.
Ow.
I went to make an account for something in the government sector that is very important, and I was told that my password had to be a maximum of 8 characters long, uppercase and lowercase, no hacking characters, such as asterisks, curly braces.
Did it use that, hacking characters, as a term?
Well, one site that I threw it up on Twitter a long time ago, but one site actually said no hacking characters and pointed things like exclamation points, quotes, and percent signs and things like that. And I'm sorry, just the brute force mechanic to gain access to these accounts. It terrifies me, and it's a bloody government website. Come on, people.
Oh, Josie, do I have a treat for you?
Oh no.
So there is one bank in Cyprus which I will not name, and they have literally 6-character limit for passwords. And their login, they give you login privately, so you cannot select your login. But the thing is that the website auto-remembers your login, and login is longer than your password. So in theory, your login is more secure than your password, but they're storing it! And 6 passwords for a bank, for a major bank. Actually, screw it, it's Bank of Cyprus, the national bank that most people use. 6 fucking characters for password.
This kind of stuff.
If people gonna lose their entire savings because the national fucking bank of entire country is so fucking retarded, then go for it. Because here's the kicker: they don't even tell you that. When you make a password, you can put whatever you want. They just trim it to 6 characters.
Okay, you can't see this for those of you who are listening to us in the future, but I think Chris almost fell out of his chair, and his arms were waving about like the wacky, wavy, inflatable arm flailing tube man. And on all honesty...
Honestly, look, right... I don't even know what to say to these people, because I worked on a project once. It was actually a good while ago, and the BAs had put a document together describing how the password and security requirements should work, and I'm like, you're not a security expert. I mean, I know I'm not, but I've worked on a lot more security systems than you have. Listen to me when I'm telling you, you don't need this password maximum length limit. These kind of things, there's so many restrictions on the password. It was almost impossible for people who didn't have a password safe to remember what their password needed to be as well. You need to give the users the facility to do what they want with the password to an extent. Yes, a minimum length, absolutely minimum length, because because of hashing and rainbow table attacks, things like that.
Well, see, that's just it. 9 times out of 10 in today's day and age, when you're storing passwords anyway, you're not storing a password. You're throwing in a salt, maybe a bit of a pepper, and you're getting a hash, and you're storing hashes. You're not actually plain text. Well, you better not be plain text in password storage.
Only 2 weeks ago, I told you the story about that database I logged into with blank passwords, and the one password, which was the system admin password, was plain text. And the SA password was
so
blank.
Hard to calm down, and you're basically setting me off again. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to tell another story.
Yes.
Happily, by the way, welcome and thank you for joining us. Tepe. Tule Tepe, I'll get your name. Oh, and my husband is now happily playing with my bunny ears on stream live. Who knew?
Is that
we
a
are
euphemism?
a mature-rated show, so there you go. But I have a story from him that I am going to tell. So this is from the Glorious Man telling us the story of vanishing lights. So I have made mention several times that I have a friend of mine who works on boats, and I mean big boats, and does some of the programming for the boats and things. It's kind of obvious who this is, but the way he tells the story is, I had this boat, a big boat, and in the boat there was a corridor. A long corridor. Almost at the end, there was a passage going left. All the lights in said corridor were connected together on the same power supply. However, on the longest part of the corridor, the lights started turning dimmer. And slowly, but steadily, they got darker and darker until it was barely moonlight levels of light. Barely. So the little side passage was fully lit up. So naturally, they started testing the system, trying to figure out what was wrong. Measured the volt, amp drain, tried replacing some light bulbs, and even some of the lamps themselves. Nothing fixed this issue. Slowly, The lights on the long stretch dimmed even more. Nothing wrong could be found. Power was okay. Lamps functioned normally when tested outside of the boat. Was getting nowhere until one day he removed one of the ceiling plates and stuck his head up there. Was hit by a very, very frigid blast of cold air. This is a spooky story, can you tell? Now, it was really cold air. This was in January. It had been -10 to -20 Celsius outside. So, what in the end turned out to be the culprit was leaking ventilation systems for the galley, the kitchen area, and it chilled all of the lamps until they could only produce moonlight. Because they probably could not transfer electricity because they were just too cold.
I don't know how electricity works, so I wouldn't know if Dow temperatures affect these things.
All I'm going to say is, the thing is, it's the kind of thing where if I was in this situation, I'd be sitting there going, should we call an exorcist?
Spike, it doesn't affect, I don't think it affects the electricity, it affects the bulbs because...
I was going to say, would it not be...
Yes.
The gas inside
all
the
the
bulbs.
time they had to warm up, right?
Well, he says power-saving lamps do not work in cold environments. He informs us in chat.
Right.
So, but yeah.
So we're experts at tech. We're not experts at electricity. I've got electricians.
Well, electricity is partially tech too. It's one of those things.
Wow.
Okay,
It's
so
very analog now.
so I've got
It
three
doesn't
more
exist on
stories.
computer screen.
I've got three more quick stories for you. We're going to go with one called The Tales of Proprietary CSV, or comma-separated values. This comes from Daniel, who is a total stranger who I have encountered in the Get Kraken Slack community. Says he was using a business-critical system, which is part of messages between server and client. And they don't touch this system, even though it's circa something like 10 years in production or so. But inside of this fantastic proprietary comma-separated value kind of storage system is a line of code, or 2 lines of code. And I am going to, for fun and profit, I'm going to put this into chat. And we're going to take a moment and view this. So what we have, for those of you who are not able to watch us, are the following 2 lines. Now keep in mind, this comma-separated value system used everything except for commas for separators. So what you see here is public static final string external underscore information underscore delimiter equals pipe.
Oh, is that an uppercase I?
Is that
Nope.
is that official? Is that official
Nope.
Okay.
naming of the character?
And then the other one is public static final string category underscore values underscore delimiter equals pipe, but with a broken line and a broken bar.
I can't remember what the name of that is, but that's the under escape, isn't it, that one?
And I've got one step even better for you. I present to you the Wikipedia article on the fact that the solid vertical bar, or the pipe, was meant to be the exact same thing, but the broken bar was brought about due to printers and things, and thus it actually had to be brought into Unicode and ANSI and all that other stuff that goes with it. But what? Why?
Information delimiter, category values delimiter.
It's just
depends.
why would
I
you
don't
have
know.
something that's like a comma-separated value, part of a messaging system, where you don't even use commas in any way?
Do you know how hard it
is
is to program a CSV system, an accurate CSV system? It's actually a lot more intricate than you'd expect. Because
I have not done one, so we'll have to explore it at some point.
You have to basically cater for any type of data. So how do you cater for a comma within a string that's comma separated?
I'd have to put some thought into that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the main issues. But
Rylix was just working on a $CSV equals string get CSV row. It's tab separated. Talupi has worked with CSVs in PICs, or PLCs, not PICs, in PLCs. Not fun. Oh, I could even begin to imagine. We'll have to put some thought to it, because I've done some things in the past based on that, because of how you have to handle text when it's pulled into certain apps, etc. And like right off the top of my head, I can't remember what I did for that. But
there's a lot of different ways to do it, but yeah, it depends on the application.
it depends on a whole bunch of factors. But yeah. And then the one before what I believe to be the doozy, but this one is awesome. It's known as Never Give PR a Cloud Platform. So PR stands for basically sales and public relations, right? So this one comes from somebody who is to remain anonymous, but you're watching, so you should know that I'm talking about you. So what we have is a company that is heavily invested in their cloud platform. We're going to call this Cloud Platform A. Okay? So Cloud Platform A is something that this company is heavily invested into. They went on a very hard promotion to everybody. Sales, customers, everyone. Come, the future is Cloud A. You want to use Cloud A. And they got a major customer to sign a multi-million pound deal. Okay? So they started to do proof of concepts. And unfortunately, the platform was very unpleasant to work on. The engineers weren't happy. The project managers weren't happy. The proof of concept goes online. The customer, the multi-million pound customer, was less than pleased, is the best way to put it. So obviously, they want off it. So the company that was promoting Cloud A as the future did a phenomenal pivot from A to a new product called Cloud B, just tearing up anything and everything that has to do with Cloud A. They pretend it doesn't even exist. And now they're off promoting the future is Cloud B. The big customer pretty much turned around and said, yeah, we're not paying. Massive losses of money occurred. And as to what actually happened and why it went wrong, they don't really know. It's almost like you shouldn't let sales sell a product that doesn't exist yet. I'm just saying.
Oh, well, that's our life, isn't it? As a enterprise developer, you're working on promises most of the time. Well, it depends again on the company, but
yes, it does indeed. Oh. And then finally, this to me is la creme de la creme. This comes from a dev I know who goes by the name of Tank Fox. Now, this is the story of the mysterious 12 megabyte patch. Hopefully, you'll find this as what the fuck is I did.
Right, let's put a proper mood on this.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Gary, for those of you not able to see, he's put a light underneath his chin, and it's basically made his nose even more pronounced and his shiny head even more shiny.
You looked a little bit like FX Twin Window Licker album cover.
Okay, so it says, one time I shipped a 12 megabyte patch through a pure text connection using convert to base 64 and cutting and pasting the whole goddamn thing.
Okay.
The only access to the server was via logging in to a VM at the customer side that was locked down to only running PuTTY and only allowed to connect to the server. No direct SSH was allowed at all. To quote them, it was a hospital and they were batshit crazy.
Yeah. That actually is quite intuitive.
There's more. Now, we provided ISO images of a virtual machine to run in customers' VMs that did secure data transfer, basically SFTP with cron, but all HIPAA approved because HIPAA is the regulations behind protecting patient data in the United States, for those who are unaware.
Like HL7 in the UK.
It's healthcare shit, basically, yeah. Yep. So, to quote him, our engineer made a patch to update the OS a bit and deliver the next version of the software, and I had rolled it out to almost all of our customers at that point, mostly via script. And I was down to the last couple boxes that, like this one, the customer refused to let us access. Most of it involved a key fob and a port being opened, or else, but these guys were a tough nut. So I was like, okay, you want to play that way? We play that way. Both ends had Perl. Perl can do base 64 conversion. So I sat there, pasted the patch into ASCII through a remote desktop connection and into a putty session, joined it all up, ran a reverse in Perl on the far side to turn it back into a binary, and by God, it worked.
Right, so this client had everything locked down, but you could still copy and paste via RDP. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But I know the actual method of doing that's really good, though. I like that.
It's an absolute genius thing. Thanks, Fox. When he told me this, my jaw hit the floor, and I was just like,
these are the. I mean, base 64 and transferring binaries, you know, and converting stuff. It's something you do as a REST developer all the time. It's a basic thing, but it's really interesting a way to get binary data over that connection converted. I like that. I really like that. I might even use that in the future.
Yeah, I think yes.
Yeah.
I was just like, that is absolutely ingenious. But of course, you know, like you said, the whole being able to copy paste thing, but actually having to go that far just to deploy a 12 megabyte patch, I'm just like, wow.
So
I was absolutely enthralled by that. I was just like, what?
Person is just a champion of dedication, if anything. Like the fucking patron saint of dedicated developers.
Yeah.
There you go, Tank Fox. You are officially the patron saint of dedicated developers. You know what his response is probably going to be? Fuck off.
Like him already.
So normally we have an RTFM, but I almost feel like this entire show has been an RTFM. Yeah. However, I'm going to give you an opportunity. We had a go at, you know, people who put restrictions on passwords. Do you guys have anything else you want to potentially just drop off into the RTFM bucket?
There's something that I have a story related to what you just talked about.
Go on. We'll run a little bit longer today because these are just too good.
So the RTFM is actually to do with a remote desktop and clients not giving me access. Because I work remotely, most of the time, luckily I get to work on my own hardware, in my via Git and push to a remote repository. So I get to use the power of my own machine. Some clients, very rarely these days, because I push back on it, make me work either via a VM on RDP or give me a laptop that's awful. Very rare that happens. One particular client would only give me a VM because they wanted to keep the source code in-house completely. And I can understand it. It was nonsense, but I can understand why they might want to do that, yeah? Everything was locked down, absolutely everything, apart from copy and paste on RDP. So I just cloned, if I needed something on my local machine, I'd just clone it from the Git repositories and copy it. You know, it was, if I needed it, I didn't in any instance most of the time, but it's there, you know. They've locked everything down apart from the thing that I'd use all day, every day. And in fact, that's an interesting security point thinking about it. If you're copying and pasting on the VM and remote copy and paste is enabled, you're actually copying, even just by virtue of using the virtual machine, you're copying things into memory on your local machine. So if they want to restrict that, that needs to be totally and fully restricted as well, doesn't it?
Sort of. It depends, because encryption can be built into whatever sort of, VM, whatever type of connection you're using. There are ways to actually do it. But it is still one of those things where it's just like, There's a level between being too secure and being basically a stick in the mud and being so sure of your security when in fact there is really nothing there to help and protect you.
At the end of the day,
there's stories behind them.
They were making developers' lives difficult just because of policy, when they could have changed the policy. That the code that we were working on was written by us, for one, from scratch, and it was delivered to them as code. We didn't have any personal data. We didn't have anything. It was just the source code for the little pieces of work we were doing.
Actually, that reminds me. There is somebody else from the community in GitKraken who made a comment, and I meant to write it down, and it literally has to do with that kind of sharing, of course, because I am a silly girl and I missed it. So let me quickly scroll back up and get it. Meow, 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 meow. Yes. So, have you ever cloned a repo for something and found login credentials already put in?
I've also pushed login credentials accidentally to Git myself, I'm afraid. And I was really nice to find, actually, when I was doing the DNI website, I pushed a SendGrid API key by accident. It's the only thing I pushed. Normally it's fine because it's private repositories and it's not worth the hassle of creating secrets because no one else has access to it apart from the people who need access to it, etc. But in this instance, it was public. GitHub sent me an email saying, we think you've pasted a SendGrid key. I was really impressed with that. And I had. It's a third-party service, I think, but it's approved by GitHub. And yeah, they told me off for it. An automatic bot told me off for it.
That's pretty cool. The first time I learned about the fact that people are pushing credentials into Git, specifically, what's the name of that? Like the most popular online Git repo thingy, open source. Microsoft recently bought it. GitLab. GitHub. Yeah, it just my mind is blanking. I mean,
we forget that Patrick isn't involved in Git every day, so it's
See, Patrick is the DevOps of the art world and the game design world, so we have to forgive him that he doesn't understand the little things that.
Oh, fuck off! I do say that for a living.
Like bookmarks and books.
Yeah, I'm releasing a game at the moment and also a demo for other games, so I have double the crunch and my brain isn't functioning as it should. So yeah, the first time I even read about people pushing into credentials into GitHub, my first thought would be, I wonder how hard would it be to write a crawler bot to trawl through all the repos. And
it's already done.
Yeah, and then
I think there's actually a GitHub
and then I saw immediately the next article after that was, by the way, there are like plenty of bots who do that. I'm like, son of a bitch. Why am I always late to the party?
Story of my life.
Tilatepe says, I found that the user/customer things, programming and dev work in general in some dark magic ritual, and that whatever is said, the system should be able to do anything. This also applies to salespeople in some cases, going back to the whole comment about the PR selling something that didn't quite exist and then not understanding perhaps why, because they didn't consult with engineers, maybe. It's not rocket science. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, wait, yes, it is. Yay, NASA t-shirt. Patrick is wearing NASA. I'm wearing bunny ears that move because shocky face.
Programming may be not a rocket science, but sometimes it is.
Patrick, are you familiar with the term Bitbucket?
Yes, I am. Why?
Okay, just curious. I mean, you didn't know GitHub, so I just wanted to make certain.
I knew GitHub, I just forgot. Come on, I described perfectly the service and its history.
It only holds most of the world's source code. Don't worry about GitHub.
I only just forgot part of the name. Come on, you're never gonna let me leave that through, right?
No.
It's not going to be a recurring joke. Like, hey, Patrick, do you know X obvious thing?
No.
I hate you.
Yes, we've reached the end of our show, have we not?
We have, yes. Thank you, thank you. Sorry, I was.
Stopped working.
I'm just going to go to bed.
Let those who are without sin cast the first stone. Here you are stricken down by your hubris.
I know, it's my own fault. Thank you very much for everybody for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the stories. I hope I've certainly enjoyed hearing the user submitted stories and ones I haven't heard from Josie and Pat before.
Yes, if you have any weird, wonderful, horrifying, crazy dev stories, get in touch with us. You can do so through hashtag DNI. Or our website. If you go to dnistream.live, you'll find links to our Discord server. We do have one. We have all kinds of random chatter in there. We have a GitHub repo, which we have publicly available if you want to get involved with some of the projects we're working on. And you can also use our dnistream.live to join us as a live guest. Come debate with us. Talk with us, challenge our philosophies, teach us something we don't know, because believe me, we know we don't know a lot. You can also suggest a topic or maybe even share a story through our website's contact form as well.
And also, sorry, I just wanted to quickly mention about the website. We've just released 0.3.1, which is just some improvements, but I'm actually working on the show list now, so we should have our podcasts and our YouTube videos all linked on there very shortly.
Yes,
fancy.
Because we are also podcasting.
Yeah. So in addition to fancy website and fancy podcasting, that's not yet the reality, but soon will be, we have a Twitter where we post all kinds of things. All the things, really. Except the things that we don't post, because we don't post those.
I agree.
You know, I don't think I've ever heard it more succinctly put, Patrick.
Honest. We're honest on this show.
Right. So next week we are going to be joined, and I just realized I didn't mean to close the thingy because it had the important. Here we go. Yes. So next week we're going to be joined by a guy who I have dubbed Sir McAwesome Sauce, but his name is Bradley McAvoy. There we go, McAvoy James, and we're actually going to be discussing worldwide game design, video game theory.
And I think it's going to be
a huge topic.
And I think it's going to be our first academia person, right? Ooh.
Yes, the academia side. Then after that, the week after that, we're going to be having someone come in, and we're going to be discussing the actual dev interview process and how horrifying it is.
Depends who you are. Depends how you approach it.
It depends on who you are, etc. But we'll be talking about everything from the tests that you're made to take, which means I'm going to be digging into what's known in the industry as brain rape, because I want to discuss. It is such a big topic, and I think it can kind of get pushed under the rug. But that's something we'll get into a couple weeks from now. And then a couple weeks after that, we're going to have Hamid from Axosoft. Whoa! Let me get the words in here.
We all need to go to bed.
We'll be talking about what it is to take an idea for software or a web app or anything like that, and take the idea and actually run with it to a point where it becomes a product that sells and you make money.
I just hope that none of the idea people are gonna watch that episode, because they're gonna multiply.
You know, I don't know a single dev who isn't on some kind of side project in some way, shape, or form. Apparently, according to Talupe, Josie.exe needs patching. And
we all need patching.
Rylex has linked a fantastic imager picture, which I am going to have to go quickly look at because it's a thing. And the statement is, freelancing is no different. Just saw this on reviews. I thought I was funny. How stupid and racist it was. So that is from Hire a Magento developer.
Oh
wow! So that link will be there in the show notes for you to look at. Talk about crazy.
I won't click it because it might accidentally pop up on the wrong screen.
I mean, it's fine, but I won't gonna read it.
It's fine, but it.
I don't want to read it out loud because I just know that someone gonna crop that one out and I'm gonna have a hell up on my head.
Oh no! Sorry, I need to correct myself immediately. It is. Rylex said freelancing is no different. Just saw this on reviews. I thought it was funny, or something along those lines, because he's replacing I with is, and I said something, so it's entirely possible that I've read that wrong, and I am very sorry. I'm a horrible community manager for our show, and I'm sorry. I'll take penance in the form of bunny ears.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Aww.
Okay, so are we going to off? Shall we finish the show then? We are
indeed. I was just going to lead us there, but yes, this is
it's
a fond farewell from it. But that's what happens when we get into stories. This is a show that we have going out every single Thursday at 7 p.m. GMT, and we also have it available on YouTube, Twitter, all that other stuff. Check us out. Now, I say bye-bye to the two most awesomest peoples ever. Bye-bye, Chris.
Goodbye, Josie.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Rylex and Talupe and Andy F and Tank Fox and everybody else. We love you. See you next week. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody else.